On the bend of the river Safra, where washerwomen slapped shirts against flat stones and egrets, stood like white exclamation points, lived a weaver named Mira. She was neither the richest artisan in town nor the poorest. Her fingers were quick and calm, her reeds always sorted by length, her dyes stacked in glazed jars that caught the morning light. By noon, she had usually woven enough market baskets to pay for lentils, kerosene, and a ribbon or two for her hair. Mira was kind in the small ways that cost nothing. She offered a stool to customers with tired ankles. She fed the stray cat that lounged under her loom and batted at the fringes. Yet beneath her tidy habits, Mira held a flaw that glinted like a needle dropped on a dark floor, hard to see, but always there. She longed to be admired, not just appreciated. Praise was her spice. Without it, meals tasted dull. The town of Dariabat had a habit of naming a master artisan each year at the monsoon festival. The title came with a brass plaque, a commission from the council, and a seat near the stage where dignitaries sipped cardamom tea. For 5 years in a row, the title had gone to Ajmal the dyer, who brewed colours so deep a shawl seemed to smoulder on the shoulders. People said he could catch the red from a pomegranate seed and stretch it across a whole sari without breaking it. People said too many things, Mira thought. Admiration, whispered a companion only she could hear, a shadow that leaned against her wall at a slanting angle. It had no face, but it had a voice like silk tugged through a ring. All you need is a grand work. Weave something that no one else dares, something the judges cannot ignore. Mira had named the companion Pride long ago. Pride had visited in small, pleasant ways, suggesting she take a better booth at the market, that she raise her prices a little, because you deserve it. Often it made sense. Often it pushed her hands to excellence. But lately, Pride had grown bolder. This year the council announced a grand theme, Measure of the Sky. Each artisan was to interpret it in their medium. Ajmal had already begun boiling indigo. The potter sketched a series of bowls in a notebook, all blue inside, like captured horizons. Mira walked the river path, thinking of the phrase until it rubbed smooth in her head. Measure of the sky. To measure the sky, you would need a ladder taller than a promise. You would need eyes that could hold distances. Or, you would need a tapestry, Pride whispered, delighted, a tapestry so broad it spills like daybreak. Weave the sky itself, sunrise to midnight, and they must call your name. Mira saw it, a wall-high piece from land to zenith, with 1,000 tiny knots. She would use the slimmest reeds, the finest jute, the softest hemp. She would dye her threads in the pale gradations of morning, the heavy blues of evening, the star-pricked velvet of night. And in its corners she would weave little stories, swallows and kites, a new moon cupped like a boat, fishermen bright as match flames on the river. On the way back she passed Layla, a widow whose goat-chewed laundry baskets always seemed to unfold at the worst moments. Layla held a broken rim in 2 hands. Mira, she said, could you repair this by Friday? My daughter's dowry rice must be clean and dry. Mira looked at the fraying, at the river sky mirrored in Layla's eyes. Repairs were fussy. Repairs wasted the long sweeping focus she needed for new work. Come Monday, she said, I'm beginning something big. I can pay extra. Monday, Pride said, gently but firm through Mira's mouth. I will do a proper job then. They parted, Layla with a faded smile, like cloth hung too long in the sun, Mira with her vision held high. She gathered reeds into bundles, and in the evening wrote in her ledger, Sky Tapestry. Around the words she drew little stars. She tied her hair with ribbon and stood before the blank loom, a bird on the edge of a wind. At dawn the ferryman, Javed, came for tea. He was old enough that the creases on his face were like tributaries feeding into the river of his mouth. Javed had ferried everyone sometime, babies to their naming, brides to the riverbank for photos, drunken men softened by the night into apology. People often told him secrets because his boat had a way of listening. "What are you weaving?" he asked, peering at the empty loom. "The sky," Mira said. Javad chuckled. "I tried to measure the sky once. I used a bowl. Caught it as a reflection. But when the wind came, my sky shivered away. It wouldn't if I wove it right." "Perhaps," Javad said, "but measure is a strange word for something that refuses to be held." "You'll see," Mira said, and pride clicked its invisible tongue with pleasure. She did not ask Javad about the river's moods, or about the temporary shades the fisherman hung between poles, or how he judged a wind before it arrived. She had work that required no river advice. She would weave the sky itself, the largest thing, the hardest to capture, and show it could be measured after all. For the first week, Mira prepared. She sorted reeds by thickness, boiled water for dyes, and made test strips of colour. She visited Ajmal's shop and bought a jar of indigo he guarded for special clients. He raised an eyebrow. "Tapestry scale," she lifted her chin. "Festival scale." "Ah," his eyes flicked to the corners, where awards hung like brass fruits. "You weave well, Mira. But remember, the sky is a jealous fabric. It changes as soon as you think you've pinned it." Pride brushed at the air as if it were shooing flies. On her way out, a boy tugged at Mira's sleeve. He was the potter's apprentice, a child with clay under his nails. "Didi, could I borrow a skein of your rough jute?" "Our kiln is hot, and I need to tie a stack." Mira had plenty. She also had a schedule written in tidy lines. Day 3, warp threads. Day 4, morning gradient. Day 5, birds. "Come back later," she said, and because something in his face made her feel watched, she added, "I'll set aside the good jute for you." "You always say later," the boy murmured, not unkindly. "Later is a pot balanced on air." He ran back to the kiln. Mira began the warp. The loom filled with vertical lines, each a promise. She hunched with her shuttle, listening to the click and swoop, the hush of thread passing through reed. There is a charm to repetition. When the thing repeated is an ambition. Hours gathered like stacked bowls. Midweek, a stranger appeared, a thin man in a thin coat who introduced himself as a broker from the city. He smelled of iron rails and questionnaires. "Madam Weaver," he said, "I saw your work in the bazaar last winter. Those pale green basket rims, the ones that match the cucumber sellers' stalls. I have an export contract. If you can produce 24 sky-coloured table runners by the festival, I can pay triple the market rate." Pride stroked Mira's hair. "The sky again," it purred. "They already hear your theme." "I'm working on a larger piece," Mira said. "I can't guarantee 24. 24 is a small sky," the broker said, smoothing the paper he had pulled from his coat. "Think of your future. Think of the council. They adore commercial success. It's the applicability." Mira's loom creaked as if a small fox were walking across it. She imagined her ledger swollen with larger numbers. She imagined a year of worry paid off, or a new roof, maybe a new reed beater with mother-of-pearl inlays. She imagined Ajmal's face, politely impressed. She imagined, and pride helped. "I can do it," she said finally, "if I work nights." The broker left, satisfied, his boots tapping a counting rhythm down the lane. Mira sharpened her shuttle and began to braid two ambitions together, strong as a rope, the tapestry and the runners. She told herself the runners were practice, small pieces of the sky that would teach her how to measure the larger expanse. She told herself she could sleep later. She told herself many things, as one does when stitching too many promises to one set of hands. In the second week, the monsoon teased the town with false starts, frizzled gusts, a few coins of rain tossed from a parched purse. The ferryman paused his boat midstream to watch the late afternoon light turn copper. The potter put the final glaze on the bowls he called horizon and sent the apprentice to fetch kindling. Ajmal stirred his indigo, humming an old tune about fishermen and loss. Mira wove the gradient of morning. It was a delicate business, blending pale straw into wheat into thin milk blue. She pinned test threads, unpinned, repinned, dissatisfied. It needs the exact breath between two notes, she muttered. That breath is called time, Pride said, amused. And you don't have it. She did not have time, because she had agreed to 24 runners. She counted number 14 and told herself she was nearly done with that half of the bargain. The broker returned with a paper to sign. Delivery festival day, morning, he said. They will sell out if people see the council praising you. Festival morning, Mira repeated. She would need to haul the grand tapestry to the square and the box of runners to the broker's table, and stand to smile while people crinkled their noses into the fabric to smell the dye. Festival morning would be a trapeze. She drew another tidy line in her ledger. Deliver both. That evening, Layla the widow came again, cradling the same old basket, now shedding little twigs. Monday has come and gone, she said. My daughter's wedding is on Saturday. Without the basket, I can't carry the rice to the mill. Mira felt heat in her cheeks. Repairs were meticulous and slow. They demanded a kind of humility because the original maker left behind decisions you had to step around. Layla, I am in the middle of the sky. Come Wednesday. My cousin is bringing a cart Wednesday. We must ride together. Please, Mira ran her thumb along the warp. Her finger found a snag. She knew she ought to fix it. She knew the better way is always to fix small faults while they are small. She felt pride draw its finger across her lips. Tell her to come after the festival, it hissed softly. And she will. They all will. You are on the edge of something after the festival, Mira told Layla, and the words tasted like water left overnight in an iron cup. Layla nodded with a flat gaze that neither begged nor reproached. She simply pressed the broken rim as if to keep it from widening and left. On Thursday night, fatigued by candle smoke and decisions, Mira stepped out for air and walked the river path. Javed was mending a rope by the landing, his fingers moving in the slow confidence of an old remedy. The river is rising, he said, not looking up. Monsoon is trying to remember itself. Will it flood? Mira asked, thinking of her dye jars, her stacked runners drying like eels on racks, her tapestry rising on the loom like a blonde wall. It always floods, a little, or plenty. The river isn't a line, it's an argument. Javed's eyes, when he glanced up, were white milk blue, like shallow water over sand. You should move your drying racks up a shelf. And check your roof. Things leak when they are most eager to hold. I can't spare an hour. The gradient in the centre keeps breaking my heart. Javed shrugged the shrug of prophets, whose warnings are old as the first boat. Then spare 10 minutes. The river is not patient with masterpieces. Pride laughed, a soft, low thread in Mira's ear. Everyone wants a portion of you while you are cooking the great soup. Tell the river to wait. Mira smiled to show she'd heard the advice, but she did not move the racks. She tightened the knots on the outer warp and decided to trust her luck, which is another way to say she placed a small bet against a large river. Friday dawned with a belligerent sun. The sky was metal bright, a lid. By noon, clouds assembled in blue-grey fleets. Children ran in and out of the shade of them, shrieking like crows. The first fat drops shook leaves and pocked the dust. Mira brought the runners inside and double-checked the clamps on her frame. It was the hour when one unscrews, screws again, then tells oneself to sleep. The storm cracked open. Rain pinned the town to its own bones. The gutters leapt. A fish sailed bravely down the lane. Mira closed her shutters and leaned back against the door, laughing at the noise. No dyeing today, she shouted at the thunder. Only weaving. but rain seeks out agreements it can break. The roof held for an hour, another hour, then surrendered in a single black seam. Water found her dye shelves. Indigo bled onto the floor in a slow, gorgeous spill. An ocean invited to dinner. The runners, which she had stacked close to the outer wall, just for an hour, drew a damp sigh and drank it. Blue climbed them like a rumour, staining the pale sections in uneven streaks, making day look like dusk. Mira shouted. The cat darted under the bed. She grabbed cloth, bowls, her own shawl to catch the drip. She looked ridiculous and desperate, as anyone is who tries to argue with water using domestic items. She remembered Javed's warning, and her chest contracted with a small, overdue humility. She moved the surviving runners, too late for half of them, and pulled the tapestry's frame toward the centre of the room, straining with its weight. The inner warp tightened and moaned. Outside, the river used the lanes for rehearsal. The ferryman roped his boat to a lamppost and shouted jokes at the sky to make it gentler. The potter's apprentice scrambled to bring in bricks of wood. Layla braced her door with sacks of lentils sealed in oilcloth. Water found Mira's ledger too. The tidy lines grew mottled and began to climb away from the page like snakes abandoning a basket. She laid it on the stove and fanned it. The storm played drums on her roof. Pride was quiet now, because pride is always quiet when the bill arrives. When the rain loosened, the town opened like an eye. Mira surveyed the damage. 14 runners were ruined. 8 were salvageable with creative trimming. They would have to be called river haze and sold at a discount to customers with high tolerance for poetry. The tapestry so far had survived, though its lower edge had drunk a memory of indigo. She slept in her chair, a thread of rain muttering into a pot. In the morning, she rose with a dry mouth and a stiff back, and the stubbornness of a person who has already lost and refuses to finish the loss. She worked until she heard the bell for the festival procession, and then, because she was not a fool, she stopped. She wrapped the tapestry in oilcloth and tied knots she had learned from watching Javed. She boxed the runners with notes to explain their new names. She combed her hair with fingers slightly blue and walked toward the square. The festival came with drummers and spiced air, with girls in skirts like spinning fruit, and men in vests embroidered in bragging colours. The council stage was garlanded with marigolds. Ajmal's stall drew a constant buzz, his shawls glowing from within, as if a small sun lived in each fold. The potter had arranged his horizon bowls in descending sizes, each one deeper blue inside, as if the sky had agreed to be portioned after all. "Late," the broker said when he saw Mira, "but let's see the goods." He riffled the runners. His face performed an ugly dance without moving much at all. "What is this mottling?" She tried to smile. "A collaboration with the monsoon." "It will not collaborate with my buyers." He pulled out his paper, tapped the clause she hadn't fully read. "Quality guarantee. I cannot pay for these, but 8 are clean." "I ordered 24. He turned away. Already his face had the freshness of a man who has chosen not to know you. Pride made a small, choking noise. Mira felt herself become both heavy and hollow. She carried the box to a bench and sat. The oilcloth-wrapped tapestry lay beside her, warm as a body in the sun. She should at least hang it. Perhaps she could salvage a different outcome. She looked up to the council stage where the master artisan plaque leaned against a chair blank as tomorrow. Layla appeared, hair pinned with cheap but lively combs. Beside her, a thin girl with hopeful wrists gazed at the world, as if it were changeable. The widow's basket was now bound with string. "The miller nearly turned us away," Layla said, without rancour. "But my cousin argued like a crow, and we carried half in our aprons." Mira spread her hands, palms stained and sorry. "I failed you." "The river failed many yesterday," Layla said. Then she adjusted the string on the basket so it would not cut her daughter's hand. But I learned another way to carry. Sometimes carrying is the piece that is woven when the basket is not ready. When they had gone, a small hand tugged Mira's elbow. It was the potter's apprentice. He held out a skein of rough jute. Didi, I borrowed some anyway. Please don't be angry. I brought this to return what I took. The kiln needed tying. He looked at her oilcloth roll. Is that the sky? Part of it. My master told me the trick of measuring the sky. The boy said, you can't measure a thing that doesn't hold still. So you measure what it does to other things, how many shadows it throws, how many birds it invites, how many balls it turns blue if you leave them outside overnight. Mira blinked. The idea slipped into her like cool water. Measure what the sky does to other things. She had tried to trap the whole sky and lost runners, sleep and a promise. But perhaps the tapestry did not need to be a map of heaven. Perhaps it could be a map of heaven's consequences. Help me hang this, she said, standing up so fast the cat under the bench hissed. Together they carried the roll to the exhibition wall, passing under a banner that read, Measure of the Sky, in letters that had bled a little into the cloth. She undid the oilcloth. The lower edge was indeed kissed by indigo, a river shadow humming through the morning gradient. She almost cried for the absurd exact aptness of it. She pinned the corners, adjusted the bottom, and let the piece breathe. People paused. The sky she had woven was not perfect, because the sky isn't. The morning light in the upper left broke too abruptly. A small fault in the middle made a sliver of horizon where none was intended, but the lower edge, sang of rain. The stain had climbed like evening climbing a wall, and it gave the whole tapestry a story. Children pointed. One old woman touched the indigo, then pressed her finger to her tongue, more habit than experiment. Javed drifted over, clothes still smelling of rope. You moved nothing yesterday, he said mildly. I moved my mind, Mira said. What does it weigh now? Less than before. The council members threaded the rows of stalls like well-fed goats evaluating a patch of garden. They leaned over Ajmal's shawls with sighs, smiled at the potter's bowls, made noises at the woodcarver's flutes. When they reached Mira's tapestry, their faces narrowed. The chairman touched the indigo edge. This bloom at the bottom, intentional. Yes, Mira said, and this time the word was free of pride. It was saturated in truth. It measures the river. Someone tittered. The chairman looked as one does when confronted by a child who has said something inconveniently wise, unusual, imperfect, but evocative. He moved on. Mira did not win Master Artisan. The plaque went to Ajmal again, and well enough. His blues bruised the afternoon into reverence. But the crowd around Mira's tapestry thickened. The potter bought one of her ruined runners and draped it over a bowl, so that the uneven blue pooled inside like captured sky. Two tourists argued politely about how much to pay for the river-kissed pieces, until they simply bought the whole unruined half and the box besides. Layla's daughter, finished at the mill, returned to stand quietly, watching the tapestry with a look of forgiveness Mira did not deserve but received. In the edges of the crowd, a very poor man with a stovepipe hat, 3 sizes too large, where had he found such a thing, touched his forehead in greeting. He had a bundle of reed flutes of the kind children make and abandon. Madam, he said, voice dusty, your blue is like the underside of rain. Will you trade 1 runner for 2 flutes? I have a nephew, restless as a mosquito, who might be soothed. Mira had just sold the last of the salvageable runners. She could have smiled carefully and declined. She could have said, I am finished. Pride, hungry and embarrassed, was already composing the refusal. But the poor man's hat had a collapsed dignity that pierced her like a crooked needle. She remembered every later she had spent instead of mercy. She remembered Layla's string. She remembered the boy returning jute he had not exactly borrowed, because he preferred to be in balance with the world. "Take this," she said, and placed in his hands the runner with the most imperfect stain, the one she had considered keeping to be her private reminder. He blinked. "It is too much for 2 flutes," he said. "Then it is a gift," she said, "for your nephew." He bowed so low the hat almost slid off. Then he lifted a flute and played a few notes that made the afternoon unclench. People turned to find the source of the sound. Birds in the plane tree shook rainwater from their feathers and improved their posture. "Measure of the sky," the poor man murmured, and it felt for a moment as if the town were a single instrument receiving the same wind. Karma's twist came that evening, not with a sudden thunderclap, but with a quiet knock. As Mira rolled up the tapestry to take it home, Ajmal approached, carrying a jar swaddled in cloth. "For you," he said, "a batch of indigo I've been perfecting. It resists bloom." A defensive blue Mira blinked, surprised, then suspicious. "Why?" "Because your piece told a better story of my blue than my shawls did today," Ajmal said, not unkindly. "You lost the prize but won the conversation. I could be envious and sour. Or I can be a river and flow where the ground tips. Also," his smile sharpened, "I was tired of winning." She took the jar with both hands. "Then let me offer you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out the only runner she had kept unsold, purely by accident. The one from the bottom of the box. It was not perfect, still carrying a faded slur of indigo. Ajmal accepted it as if accepting news. "Keep it," she said, as a reminder that dye and story share a border. On the way home, the potter's apprentice walked with her, the 2 flutes crisscrossed in his belt. "Dee," he said, "my teacher says a bowl is only useful because of what is not there. Is a tapestry like that too? Useful because of the empty space we imagine?" "Maybe," Mira said. "Maybe a tapestry is a bowl you hold with your eyes." "What will you weave next?" "Repairs," she said, "beginning with Layla's basket." She paused, and a series of small pieces called consequences, little squares with stains and shadows. "Things the sky does to us." When she reached her home, she climbed onto the roof with twine and bitumen and patched the seam she had ignored. The cat patrolled and pronounced the job adequate. Night folded Daryabad into its selves. From the river came the sound of Javed's oar, knocking softly against the boat as it slept. Pride was quiet, or perhaps it had learned to speak differently, less a coiled whisper, more a question. It asked, "Who do you serve when you work?" The answer was not the council, or the broker, or even my own hungry heart. The answer was the story, the river, the stain, the woman with a frayed rim asking for a mend, because carrying is a kind of art too. Mira sat at her loom and breathed. She threaded her shuttle and began the simple labour of repair, which is a love letter written backward. Dawn opened carefully the next day, as if afraid to disturb something delicate. The festival's music had stayed in the rafters overnight, and now drifted down like well-behaved ghosts. Mira boiled tea. She washed the last of the indigo from her palms. When Layla arrived with the broken basket, Mira greeted her at the door with a stool and a promise she could keep. She set the old rim on her lap. Each broken spur spoke its own dialect. Repairs require listening. She softened the old reeds with warm water, so they would accept a new curve without argument. She matched thickness to thickness, rather than forcing a single standard. While her hands worked, she told Layla about the tapestry's stain and how it had turned from mistake to meaning. Layla nodded the way people do when they have learned to interpret the world's crooked gifts. "My daughter," Layla said, "told me she likes your tapestry because it looks like a memory." Not accurate, but true. Children know most of the important things years before we do, Mira said. Then we make them forget by discussing money." They laughed. The cat leapt into the empty basket and settled, as if to certify the weave. The morning eddied around them, the call of the man who sharpened knives, the thud of the potter's apprentice chopping wood, the ferryman's low humming. In the corner, wrapped loosely, the sky tapestry waited, not grand, not small, simply patterned with the weather it had endured. By noon, the repair was done. Mira had not tried to hide the mending. Instead, she let the new reeds announce themselves in a gentle spiral, so that anyone looking closely could see the history of the break. Layla ran her fingers along the pattern and smiled. "You have measured the basket's patience," she said. "Perhaps patience measures us," Mira replied. Word of the tapestry's stain and the runner's story moved the way good rumours do, finding the ears that need it. A school teacher came to request a small banner for her classroom with the words "Measure what matters" woven into the border. A farmer asked for sacks for seed that would keep out weevils and the worst of humidity. "It is not noble work like festival pieces," he apologized. "Strength is nobility in another uniform," Mira said, and quoted a proverb her mother used to mutter while rescuing stones from the path. "A thing that lasts is a song you can hum while you carry water." She began scheduling her tasks differently. Morning for commissioned art and experiments, afternoon for repairs, evening for simple market work that paid for oil and onions. She left white space in the ledger. She wrote "rest" as if it were a client. Several days later, the poor man with the stovepipe hat returned. With him came a boy, perhaps 9, whose knees had not yet learned negotiation with trousers. He held the stained runner as though it vibrated. "My nephew has played the flute every evening since," the poor man said. "Our neighbours threw us an onion to encourage us to stop, but then they began to hum. I think he is learning the sky scale." The boy raised the flute and played a tune that sounded like rain arriving before people put laundry inside. Mira felt the notes rearrange her ribs, making more room for ear. When he finished, she handed him a bundle. "For the flute's case," she said. It was a pouch she had woven from leftover warp, durable as a promise. The boy bowed too low, copying his uncle, and nearly kissing the floor. In time, the council commissioned a banner for the ferry landing. "Wait for the boat, as if it were your own," it read, and each word carried a swath of blue. Javed laughed when he saw it. "And who will read it?" he asked. "People only read the river when it spills into the shoes." "But the banner will read them," Mira said, "and decide whom to forgive." Ajmal sent a young assistant to learn edges from Mira, because her new pieces finished themselves in a way his shawls envied. Pride, which had once demanded a polished mirror, now served as a lens that magnified small excellence. Mira found she could enjoy admiration without it souring into hunger. It tasted now like a spice added after the stew is complete, not like the base of the meal. As for the master artisan title, no one remembered, 2 months later, who had won it that year without looking at the plaque. But they remembered Mira's stain. The potter painted a ring of indigo along the inside bottoms of the horizon bowls, a deliberate echo, and sold them as a pair with slices of dyed cloth so blue that water looked up from them and recognized itself. One evening, as the river took the colour of cooled iron, Mira carried a small parcel to Layla's house. Inside were 10 narrow bands, consequences she called the series, each a different story the sky had written on the world, the lace of leaves against morning, the wavering lines of heat, the onion skin translucence of late afternoon, the headache purple before rain, the stubborn dirty white of a dry season, the river's blue lip on a low wall, the wishbone of birds migrating, the soft bruise of dusk, the salty black, where fishermen's lamps puncture, and finally a pale dawn, like a promise unwrinkling itself. Layla and her daughter arranged them along the wall above the cot. "Now we live inside time," Layla said. On the way home, Myra crossed paths with the potter's apprentice, who had grown an inch in a question. "Dee Dee," he said, "how will you know when you've measured the sky completely?" Myra thought of her ledger with its new white spaces, of the repaired baskets that told their breaks without shame, of the flute's notes that made neighbours complain and then hum, of the river that argued every year, and yet could be coaxed by a banner into being slightly kinder at the landing. She thought of pride, which now asked useful questions. She thought of that first refusal to fix a broken rim, because she had been busy with a sky too large to hold. "I won't," she said. "The sky is a teacher without a timetable, but I will keep measuring what it does to us. That's enough." The apprentice considered this seriously. "Then I will keep measuring clay. Every bowl is a story of hands." "Exactly," Myra said, "and stories are the only rulers that grow longer when you share them." That night she climbed to the roof again. The patched seam held. Stars pricked through the blue like the tips of sewing pins pushed up from the underside of fabric. Beneath the roof, her loom waited. She felt gratitude as a practical warmth, not a speech. It rose from the ankles and crept up her shins like river water that wasn't angry at all. She set a basin on the roof and watched it fill with the night's reflection. If she had tried it weeks ago, she would have called it measuring the sky. Now she called it a reminder to look down before she looked up. The basin reflected a broken square of stars. When a wind moved, the bowl shivered its small galaxy into trembling lace. Myra smiled, not at the sky, but at the bowl. She carried it downstairs, set it beside the loom, and began a new piece in the Consequences series, Starlight in a Poor Man's Hat. The first threads were humble. The pattern knew more than she did. The cat, who cared only for the warmth of her ankles, purred a rhythm that puzzled itself into the warp. And when the next monsoon came, Myra moved the racks early. She found pleasure in the solid thock of a roof seen properly sealed. She repaired 2 baskets that had broken in the same place, and felt in her hands the way both breaks taught the same lesson. People said she had grown gentler. People said her work had grown brave. People said many things. She listened the way Javed's boat listened, by floating. One afternoon, the broker from the city returned, his thin coat a little thinner. He had heard that Myra's river-kissed pieces were now coveted by tourists and locals with an appetite for stories. He offered a new contract, respectful in the portion he named. Myra accepted with conditions: delivery scheduled after the rains, quality inspected by Layla, a clause that allowed for acts of river without penalties and instead with renegotiation. The broker blinked and then agreed, which is to say he learned something. Karma had completed its circle. A selfish refusal had cost Myra sleep, money and ease. A late kindness had invited unexpected music, Blue and fellow craftsmen who met generosity with generosity. The river remained the river. Pride remained a resident, but in a quieter room. And Myra became a measure of the sky, because she had let the sky measure her. Before sleep, she wrote a final note in her ledger with a stubby pencil. Repair keeps time. Art keeps meaning. Kindness keeps both. Then, because she had left a white square on the page for it, she added rest and obeyed her own instructions. A mistake faced honestly can become the most meaningful part of your craft. Before today ends, repair one small thing you've put off, an item, a promise, a relationship. Then share one craft or skill you have to lighten someone else's load. Let the sky be measured by what your hands do next.